Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw us some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall.
And I'm parched.
Yeah.
You ever have one of those days where you just sit and you're like tick it out on the computer like all day, doing your stupid little computer tasks for your stupid little job, and then you just like it's 5 p.m. and you're like, oh fuck, I didn't drink a drop of water today, just 2 gallons of coffee. That was my day.
Yeah, I do that regularly. I also sometimes will go the entire day and realize, oh, you haven't eaten.
Yep.
So
that's a classic.
there are times where I just like input into my body nothing but coffee until like after 5 p.m. And those days are maybe not the best for
challenging.
Like me feeling like a human being.
Yeah. Well, I have great news, Niall.
Okay.
We have a tasty little morsel that showed up in our inbox.
Oh fuck, I'm hungry.
Before this episode. So let me feed you a tasty little treat. We got an email from somebody going by the name of Derek. And here's what Derek has to say. The email was titled Snallygaster, so I had a feeling it was about that.
Well, it'd be really funny if it had nothing to do with that whatsoever, and they hadn't even listened to that episode.
Yeah, that would be remarkable, really. Which also, not to put Derek on blast here, but Derek spelled Niall's name Nyle, which I can understand, especially given our names being so similar and all that. I could see how you would think that Niall would be spelled by Kyle because it's almost like we're doing sort of like a bit.
Yeah.
But for future reference, it's
and also like
N-I-L-E.
I don't put my name all over the
That's
place,
true.
so I get it. I take no offense. I'm just happy to have an email because I'm
also
hungry.
Kyle is a very normal name. Let's be very clear here. That
yeah.
Unlike Niall, Kyle is just super normal, Yeah. But like your only representation is always like getting it wrong in one way or another, right? Like Niles is always
my fucking work emails are littered with every possible substitution or misspelling possible because like people will be replying. I'll be in a thread where we've been talking multiple like for like 2 days, and then someone will come back and be like, "Oh, Kyle," and I'm like, how long do I have to talk to you before you realize, like, before you check, like, the 4 places in the last email that I sent you that has my name correctly?
It's for me, it's like whenever somebody fucks up Kyle, it's like they had to, like, really go out of their way to really beef it on that one. Because, like I said, Kyle is a very easy, well-known, simple name, hard to mess up. So if somebody does, it's always like, man, what state of mind were you in?
And the best part about this whole discussion is that there's no hypocrisy to it whatsoever. We pronounce and spell everything 100% correctly on this podcast, and have never made a mistake on any name whatsoever.
I pride myself on getting it right the first time every time. So Derek says, "Dear Niall and Kyle, I just finished listening to your newest episode about the Snallygaster and decided it'd be the perfect excuse to write in and thank you for inspiring me to come up with my own cryptid D&D campaign. I love that. I love that a lot. I ran it about a year ago, and it was loosely based off of your Campfire Stories episodes, with the Mothman being the main plot-centric cryptid. The reason this last episode reminded me to thank you was that one of the cryptids included was the Snallygaster. I also think you'd be happy to hear that I had the Dwayyo and the Snallygaster battle it out in said campaign. In any case, I left the campaign in a hiatus due to the lack of inspiration, so maybe you can consider this a request for more campfire story episodes, since those are what initially inspired me. Whether you heed my request or not, I'm still thankful for the podcast. I especially love cryptid episodes, and the show always helps me pass the time, whether I'm at work or on a long drive, to keep up the good work. Sincerely, Derek. And included are some depictions of the Dwayne and Snallygaster that Derek's girlfriend made for the campaign. These are fantastic, by the way. Let your girlfriend know that these are really very nice, especially the Snallygaster. I love the depiction of the Snallygaster here. That's super awesome. We get a lot of comments about people loving the Campfire Stories episodes, which always makes me blush, because like those are frankly, I don't know how you feel, but the Campfire Stories episodes are always the ones that I overthink and feel very anxious about when I'm having to prepare that. So to hear that people like them so much is really great. So
it's one of those things where like the rest of the show is very like, oh, here's the information I found, and the Campfire Stories are you and I both trying to create something fun, and it's just an entirely different energy than the show normally is, and it's good to know that it's something that people enjoy, because I very much enjoy doing them. It just is unfortunate that they're the hardest episode for us to do.
Yeah, especially
so
now
we don't get to do them very often.
Just to be clear, because we've had some people ask, and we might as well address it on the show. It's not like those episodes aren't gone.
No.
It's just logistically difficult right now, but we will work on that. So just stay tuned. That's all I'm going to say about that. Geez. Well, thank you for the email, Derek.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Niall, are you ready to get into this with me?
I am very curious what you're going to bring. Like there are times where, because we tend to try to like not hit the same area 2 weeks in a row, where like, I'll do a cryptid episode and then I'll be like, okay, Kyle's not gonna do a cryptid. Now, like, I try to like gauge some idea of what I think that you're going to do. And not like a specific topic, but like just an area. And there's so many times that I'm so wildly wrong and surprised by the topic that you pull that it's very entertaining to me. So
yeah, I try to keep you on your toes. And this is frankly something that I've known about for a while, and have been okay. Let me put it this way: you're gonna hear about this, and you're gonna be like, why wasn't this a fuck your documentary? Why wasn't this a documentary episode? I watched an entire documentary by myself, quote unquote documentary, by myself to prepare for this episode. And I think it'll become pretty clear why as we go through this. So
because you're unhinged and don't have a good work-life balance, is that why?
That's a part of it.
Yeah.
That is a part of it. But I do have a good reason that we'll uncover here. I honestly, people who have already seen the title and who know, like, I feel like people who already know what this is are like, I can't believe that. Maybe their response is, I can't believe that they would watch this shit for the show. But rest assured, only I had to do that. And honestly, just generally speaking, the more that I learn about the grand UFO cover-up and disinformation conspiracy, the more it seems like there's a lot of characters and names and layers that are all entangled. Niall, you know that not too long, and probably most of our listeners, you all know that not too long ago, I did a very broad overview of the major beats of a UFO government cover-up and disinformation conspiracy. It involved a lot of people. Linda Moulton Howe, Bill Moore, Paul Benowitz is kind of the core of a lot of it. That a lot of different ufologists, a lot of different landmarks in ufology in the United States. And then, of course, there were these suspicious government actors who passed along supposedly real, in quotations, documents proving that this cover-up had happened and that the United States government was in on it. So where Niall has their wheelhouse in super soldiers and dumbs, deep underground military bases, I've been increasingly obsessed with this overarching UFO conspiracy. I'm pretty addicted to it. I've been reading Mirage Men, which is also the documentary that I watched when I did that 3-part series. I've been very interested in this. It's a lot of fun to me. But best part that I think I'm finding out as I learn more about these people involved, super soldiers, deep underground military bases, all that stuff is attached to this conspiracy. There's just like so many angles that you can cover. And this week I got into an angle that I think is very fun. And I think we're going to have this UFO cover-up disinfo conspiracy. We're going to kind of piece by piece find different angles over time, or at least that's my plan. It's like over time, I'm going to uncover more aspects of this story, and we can put more of it together. But this week specifically, I want to talk to you, and you can tell me immediately if you've heard of this, Niall. I want to talk to you about the story of a little show called UFO Cover-Up Live.
I don't. I can't tell you. I don't know. That it's a somewhat generic title, so there's a possibility that I've come across it somewhere, but it's not something that I'm familiar with. I can tell you that much.
Okay. Well, all right. UFO Cover-Up Live was a 1988 made-for-TV movie, if you will, or if you really want to stretch it, it's a documentary. I believe it was aired in like 2 parts. It's like about 2 hours with ads. And it would be considered kind of like pretty traditional fare for televised UFO media these days. UFO-related documentaries that have that unsolved mysteries format. That programming when it focuses on the UFO phenomenon, that I think would kind of come about in earnest in the mid 1970s. The most famous example I would think of would be In Search Of, that for a good while was hosted by Leonard Nimoy. So I would say that the shows like this have been a pretty innocuous staple in the UFO culture for a long time, but UFO Cover-Up Live would kind of end up being something a bit different. So on the surface, Cover-Up Live was essentially just another one of these TV documentary style shows about UFOs. It's a pretty typical framing of one of these shows. Its mission statement is like, we're about UFO disclosure. Can we dig into the question, did the government cover up the existence of UFOs? However, it also had this twist of like, it's going to have a live element. I mean, it's in the name, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And
what was this live component?
Well, at the start, there are different phone lines offered for folks to call in depending on what kind of UFO or ET encounter they had. So, like, there was a line for close encounters of the first kind, second kind, and of course, third kind. And it was going to be like, not improvisational, but it was going to be somewhat spontaneous and just literally happen live. So that was one aspect of it, right? That was supposed to happen. I say supposed to happen. We'll get to that. But another little interesting tidbit about this program that I guess is novel is that it's the first televised mention of the Area 51 incident. So that's something, I guess. But it would kind of generally explore UFO sightings, abduction encounters, like the United States populace and its government's relationships to the phenomena. You kind of get the picture. But they would also interview various researchers and investigators. And we'll get to this. And this might. Okay, look. They had 2 secret sources kept in silhouette and given like alterations to their voices to maintain anonymity. I can never say
anonymity.
This word. Anonymity. That is my number one fucked up word. I don't know what it is. These 2 sources, Niall, would go by, and we're going to dig into this, so just hold your breath. They would be going by the codenames Falcon and Condor, and they would be brought on to discuss the recent acquisition of the Majestic 12 documents.
Oh my God. Okay.
So here's the thing. I spared you. I watched the show myself, and it's not only pretty bad, but it's like surreal. You can, if you want, find it on YouTube. It's very awkward. Um, what I want to talk about are the behind the scenes stuff. Because the behind the scenes stuff is what played into UFO Cover-Up Live being a complete disaster that not only kind of just dissatisfied casual TV audiences, but also just like depressed those in the UFO community who were invested in the problem of disclosure. Um, there's a lot of familiar people in the UFO scene at the time that are involved with this, but I'm going to dig into some other people we haven't really talked about as well.
Okay.
So, the inception of this show comes from industrial designer Curtis Brubaker and a syndication company called LBS Communications. Now, in 1986 and 87, LBS had produced television specials called The Mystery of Al Capone's Vaults, and then another one called Return to the Titanic Live, both of which had successfully netted a cool couple million. Now, the whole idea of these was that they had a hook, and it was kind of driven by this idea that a huge secret would be revealed at the end of the program.
I remember I've heard about the Al Capone one. I think I've
Okay.
actually seen a clip from it where it turns out there's just like nothing in
Yeah,
the
well,
vaults.
and then there's also I watched a little bit of the Titanic Live one just because I was like, well, what were these like? People apparently loved these, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And when I like kind of skipped around in the Titanic one, it was some celebrity whose name I can't remember just talking about the Titanic and revisiting some of the people that were involved and all that. And then at the end, I think they had like what was essentially treasure from the Titanic, like stuff salvaged from the Titanic that was going to be like looked at by professionals to assess value and all that stuff, and they're pulling people's like, I don't know, like watches and other weird bullshit off. So I think that was like the big reveal at the end was like, we have like all this shit from the Titanic that we're going to go through. So that's fine, but the idea was they were going to take that same format and use it on the UFO phenomenon with the reveal at the end of like the status of disclosure and all this stuff. Now, Brubaker.
What if something like this was how the government disclosed alien life? Like there's just this live TV event, and at the end they just brought out an alien. Like what the fuck?
It's honestly almost as absurd as that. Way stupider, but that would be honestly truly incredible. Just have a live here's the thing though, it's 2023. That shit's gonna get streamed on Twitch. Some government official is gonna be like, oh, poggers in the chat for when the EBE comes out, you know. So
Yeah.
that's what
if-
we're actually
if-
dealing with.
What if an alien just like somehow got entered into the Masked Singer, and all of their fucking like hint packages were like talking about the some galaxy and all this shit, and hangs out in Arizona and or New Mexico, and then they just unmask themselves and it's just an alien, and Ken Jeong just like loses his mind.
Yeah, they're having
Come
the alien. They're in an alien costume,
on.
and they've chosen like a UFO themed Parliament Funkadelic tune. It would be really meta, yeah. Or was it
Masked Singer?
wait, was it Parliament Funkadelic who did Unfunky UFO? Am I losing my mind?
I think that's right.
I think that's right. So they're doing stuff like that, very typical. I've not seen The Masked Singer, but that's kind of like the impression that I've got about it.
They get unmasked after singing "Aliens Exist" by Blink
Yeah,
182.
they tap into a lot of like funk hits. But yeah, so Brubaker had previously worked on the special effects for a TV show in the late 70s called Project UFO, which it blew my mind that this existed. This was a short-lived fictional series about the investigations of two agents working for Project Blue Book.
Okay.
Didn't
So
know about
it's-
this.
And okay, so these weren't like real agents. It's not like they had someone
No.
playing Hynek or whatever. This was just a
No.
okay. Interesting. I might have to look for that.
Yeah, I have no idea if it's like any good, but that's a thing that existed. So this guy who had done the special effects for that show, Brubaker, he would pitch the concept of exposing a government cover-up of UFOs, and then this pitch would become UFO Cover-Up Live. Now, I have some interview quotes from people like Brubaker that came in 2021, and at the end of the show, I'll reveal my sources so people can look this stuff up if they want. But in 2021, in a phone interview, Brubaker talked about how the initial pitch came about. So here's what he says, quote, I was driving south on the 405 freeway in Los Angeles down to Laguna with my wife, and on the air, on the Michael Jackson show, a British guy who had a talk show, not the singer.
Oh, okay. I couldn't think of a time that he had a fucking radio show.
Was Bill Moore and his buddy Jamie Shandera. I listened carefully to all the stuff they were saying and told my wife, if all this shit is going on, these abductions and all this stuff, somebody ought to file a lawsuit and take the government to court. We ought to get some expert witnesses and find out what the hell is really going on, because this is an invasion of Americans' privacy. So, per Brubaker's recommendation, former screenwriter on Saturday Night Live and Star Trek Next Generation writer Tracy Torme was tapped to help produce a segment in the program on the Gulf Breeze UFO incident, which is not, we haven't actually covered the Gulf Breeze UFO incident, but we did cover the Gulf Breeze 6, which would come a little while after the UFO incident. But there was the guy who saw the UFO at Gulf Breeze, took photos, etc. It was later revealed to probably be a hoax. But furthermore, Torme is also very interested in the UFO phenomenon, like actually into it, and he has been his entire life. In the 90s, he would actually go on to adapt the story of the abduction of Travis Walton into Fire in the Sky.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He also talked on Coast to Coast AM in 2008, I think it was, talking about his interest in the phenomenon.
I actually want to watch that movie. I've never seen
I
Fire
do
in the
too.
Sky, but I think it's good.
I can tell you this much. Travis Walton and other people involved with the actual case kind of come down hard on it.
Oh, really?
I think it's got pretty mixed reactions from the UFO community, but I would check it out for sure. But yeah, and I don't think we've covered Travis Walton's case, actually.
No, I don't think so either.
So we'll have to make a note of that. Torme's interest in UFOs also put the production immediately on track with some big names in ufology of the 1980s. He reached out to personal friend and UFO researcher Bill Moore. So in an interview, Torme spoke about Moore's involvement and said this, quote, the reason Bill Moore got involved with UFO Cover-Up Live was that it was during the time when he was sharing a lot of his stuff with me. Roswell was always something I'd been really interested in. He took me actually at one point with him and Jamie to the crash site at the Foster Ranch, which was way before it was publicized. Now, I'm not going to go over Bill Moore in depth too much again. He will one day probably have his own dedicated episode, but I feel like also the amount of stuff that he touches up against that reveal his involvement in the UFO community, we're just going to build a profile on the guy. But I've previously talked about his role with the infamous Majestic 12 documents and the UFO cover-up and disinfo stuff. But it was the book, The Roswell Incident, that Moore co-authored with ex-intelligence officer Charles Berlitz in 1980 that brought him prominence in the UFO community. That was his breakout thing. And before that, Roswell, as I kind of understand it, was not actually the like core big deal UFO story. Not until after this stuff started happening in the 80s and it became more subject to discussion. So this would, lead to Moore carrying a lot of the responsibility for solidifying Roswell as a centerpiece of the United States UFO mythology. That to this day, this is what we think of, right?
Yeah.
Now, Jamie Shandera, the guy mentioned by Brubaker, is a friend of Bill Moore's and a fellow ufologist. Also, Shandera claims to be one of the ufologists who received the Majestic 12 documents. Specifically, he says that in late 1984, although some places I saw January 1985, spoiler, with Jamie Shandera and Bill Moore, dates get a little confusing sometimes.
Oh, really? The dates don't always line up exactly?
Not always.
I love the place. Okay, this is probably a larger question, but these people that were so involved with Majestic 12 stuff and like were basing a lot of their stuff around Majestic 12, when that stuff like got summarily debunked, did they go away or are they still around?
Oh my God. I mean, okay, we're gonna get to it, but let me just tell you this. Even as soon as the Majestic 12 documents came out, notable skeptics were like, "This is bullshit."
Okay.
There were ufologists who said this is bullshit. And then, of course, 1989 MUFON Symposium, Bill Moore drops the fucking bomb, but it's like there's so many feedback loops that have happened throughout all of this that it is just like there. I feel like there are layers to how aware you are of the UFO, like ufology's history and all this stuff, and you have to be on like a particular level. And I don't mean this in like a pretentious way. It's just a fact. Like you have to know about these random things to then kind of come to. You eventually find this, I think, the more time you spend reading about UFOs and whatnot. Like you don't start reading about UFOs with the story of the MUFON Symposium of 1989 and Bill Moore, right?
No,
Like
no.
that's not where I think you start.
That would not be in 101. That might be like a 301 type thing.
Right. So, yeah, it's still a thing. They're still around, but I don't know. I honestly don't think they're very present in the UFO community. I mean, surprise, surprise, but like they're still alive. They're like both in their 70s and they're still around, but I think they're probably just chilling. Honestly, I haven't looked into if they've been like when they were last active. I do think that Bill Moore, I don't know as much about Shandera. I'll have to look into him some more. But I do know that Bill Moore, at least even after the disaster of the symposium, he still tried to maintain a presence in the community, but I think he just got kind of ousted. So
That makes sense.
yeah. But Shandera is one of the people who claims to have received these documents. He specifically says that either in late 1984 or early 1985, he got an envelope from Albuquerque that contained a roll of undeveloped film, and contained in the film were pictures of something called the Eisenhower Briefing Document. Now, if you will remember from our coverage of Majestic 12, you'll kind of have an idea of what's going on here. So he would get this Eisenhower document. There's also a letter that seemed to be from President Harry Truman addressed to James Forrestal, the first U.S. Secretary of Defense. And these pages were stamped with the now infamous top secret Magic Eyes Only, MAJIC, and contained a briefing for President Eisenhower for November 1952. And then it said like, only those with so-called Majestic 12 clearance were to see the documents. There's a lot of other stuff in there, like names of members of the secretive Majestic 12 group. So that would be, I think most notably, UFO skeptic and debunker of the era, Dr. Donald Menzel, who was just he was a researcher of UFOs, but like was just a very well-researched skeptic and debunker.
Okay.
Now, most important of all, contained in these documents were details on the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting of 1947, as well as details surrounding the Roswell incident that occurred 2 weeks after Arnold's sighting. All of this has been covered on the show, so go find those episodes if you don't know what we're talking about. Notably, the section on Roswell mentions a recovery operation in a remote location in New Mexico, plus the recovery of 4 extraterrestrial bodies from the wreckage. A number of ufologists would receive Majestic 12 documents, but it would be Bill Moore who disseminated them through the press in 1986. So that's a brief. That's what the Majestic 12 stuff is, very briefly. Again, we've covered this, but I hope the context is a little helpful if you're not aware of this already somehow. The stuff I just described would cause a total clusterfuck in the UFO community. Even with, like I said, a lot of skeptics and ufologists alike dismissing it. So it's tenuous, but nonetheless, it's out there. Now, despite this, Moore and Shandera were the first contacts to work with the team that was developing UFO Cover-Up Live. They were like the first 2 major gets from the UFO community. But day one, there were problems. First, the previous 2 specials that this program's format would be based on were produced by a seasoned duo that were too busy to work on UFO Cover-Up Live, so they just couldn't get the people who had done the other 2 specials. They just didn't have them.
So their behind the scenes were just fucked from the beginning. They
Right
had
from the start.
that any like thing they had learned from the first two, they didn't have for the second and third one. Okay.
Yes, just not
Makes
there.
sense. Look, I'm just gonna go ahead and count the number of places this should have just reassessed their
Oh my
thing
God.
here and moved on.
It-
Because here's number one. This is number one of where you should have not done this.
I don't know if you have enough fingers to count,
Okay.
so you better start looking at your toes.
Look, I'm not wearing any shoes or socks right now. All you freaks, just so you know that. So I can get up to 20.
Okay, cool. So the only returning member of these previous shows would be a low-level producer named Michael Seligman, whose previous credits were mostly from working as an associate producer of the Academy Awards. That was their experience.
I mean, that's not a small
It's
job.
not-
Like,
It's not nothing. Don't get me wrong.
no,
But
but you're not like leading an entire broadcast that way.
no. Especially not one this ambitious, you know?
Yeah, live TV is fucking hard.
Yeah. Now, Seligman also had no experience or knowledge of the UFO phenomenon. So,
Two.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
To make matters worse for the production, check this out. The Writers Guild of America was on strike at this time.
Three. Okay, there we
So,
go.
people didn't want to write on this show. Now, whatever. Seligman was able to find a fucking scab named Barry Taff.
Okay.
And
Sorry, this is a comedy of errors already.
it's really crazy. You're not. Just you wait. Barry Taff is a man whose previous credits were consulting on the 1982 supernatural horror film The Entity, and then
okay.
they would also write the occasional article in UFO and paranormal magazines. Specifically, Taff had written for UFO magazine back in the day. Not very long after UFO Cover-Up Live aired, a firsthand account of Taff's experience was published, I guess, on a UFO bulletin board system by the editor of UFO magazine, Vicky Cooper. Now, here's the thing. This was published under Taff's name on a bulletin board online.
Right.
Taff would, for some reason, later deny having ever written this article. But I'll come back to Taff's expose in just a bit. So Torme, the Star Trek writer, despite being an experienced writer, would not work as a writer for UFO Cover-Up Live due to ongoing arbitration issues with the strike. According to Torme, he would often be pressured to write for the program, including by Seligman, but he refused every time. Taff was initially their only real bet for writing, but he ended up only working on the project for a few days. So in an email correspondence on the matter, Taff explained his how it had kind of gone down for him. So here's what he says, quote, "I was indeed hired to write said show, but as I did not have any experience in writing in the format of TV news, I was let go very early on. Therefore, I had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the writing or production of that 2-hour show. As documentaries are not supposed to have writers, someone at the production company with a bad sense of humor threw my name into the matter."
Huh. Okay, so he's claiming that he didn't have anything to do with it whatsoever,
Essentially.
despite being credited like that. Okay, I know this is a whole thing. I know that like writing credits are really fucking hard to like parse because there's whoever basically the person that gets credited on something, especially a movie or a TV show, may not have actually been the one that initially generated the script or whatever else. There's like all of this stuff that goes into the literal like legal meeting where credits get assigned. So, but like documentaries, he's right, don't usually have I mean, but they do though. Like
They do.
in terms of the like, right? You write the script. Like it's not unless you're just like cameras on the streets recording real people.
Well, and that's the thing. This is UFO Cover-Up Live.
True.
This is supposed to be, as I kind of understand the initial idea, it's supposed to be a live event with live like interviews with these different subjects related to the topic. And I think most of the scripted stuff would have been questions that the celebrity host would have for people and things like that. But even, and we'll get to this.
Have you said the celebrity host yet?
No, we'll get to that.
Okay.
The celebrity host would, in fact, later say, like, I wanted to ask follow-up questions that were not on the script, but I was not allowed.
Oh, okay. That sucks.
So from Taft's own comments, if you do assume that this article published to the UFO bulletin board system was really him, he makes it sound like working with Moore and Shandera to him seemed like the, quote, opportunity of a lifetime. Because, like, again, Taft is genuinely into the UFO phenomenon. He's writing for these magazines. But the chaotic production would end up being anything but an opportunity of a lifetime. By all accounts, there was a rotating door of producers, writers, and just different characters from ufology and like skeptics and all kinds of people. This would lead, also because of this, this would lead to very inconsistent segments and onset frustration. So, like, I watched it, like I said, there would be times where it's like, it seems like they're talking about something deadly serious, and then there would be something weird and silly, and it was just, it's very all over the place. And then the live angle is essentially abandoned. They would have everybody very obviously reading off of, like, cues and teleprompters. Strangely enough, some of the people who didn't write, like, who seemed to not be reading off of those things were the skeptics who were brought onto the program. So Torme would describe how things were starting to fall apart. And specifically, they would talk about how the producer, Michael Seligman, something weird was going on with Seligman and just the production in general. So Torme says, quote, "The material really started to freak Michael Seligman out. When he came back, he was so paranoid and looking over his shoulder all the time." And then decades later, in a 2016 interview about his side of the story on the production of UFO Cover-Up Live, Torme would further corroborate the bizarre stories of Moore and Seligman and all these people on set. Here's what he says, quote, "Bill Moore wanted to get involved in the project because he'd heard all about it. So he came in and it was very, very cloak and dagger. He insisted on meeting the producers behind closed doors, and they couldn't tell any of us what they had discussed. Before long, Moore flew the producers out to an island in the middle of the Great Lakes where he introduced them to his inside informants, Falcon and Condor." So, what had...
I'm curious, I'm just, not to get too far ahead of you, I don't need a full answer.
I know...
Do you know who Falcon and Condor are?
Pretty sure, yes.
Okay, you don't have to tell me yet. I'll let you reveal it at your own pace. I just wanted to know if I should if I should have the expectation in my brain that these people are still at large. Okay.
It's one of those things that comes up in these stories that it's like, you can't 100% say for certain but like, you'd be very safe to say that the people that have been outed as being Falcon and Condor are probably the people. So we'll get to that. So what had initially begun as a legitimate attempt to explore the nature of UFOs in a government cover-up turned into a, quote, schlocky sci-fi talk show. Things were very fishy, and this decision to pivot away from an air of legitimacy, like an actual exploration of UFOs and disclosure, seems to have come from on high and was an actual choice being made by somebody. Many of the crew took notice of this. In an interview, Brubaker mentions the odd circumstances of the meetings between Seligman and an unnamed intelligence contact that Moore had brought in on the project. So here's what Brubaker says. Quote, "There were mysterious meetings. Seligman would go off to some other state and meet people by a lake and take a boat out to an island. It sounded like a setup to me. There was always this focused mystery set up around his meetings. I don't know if they were real or what. He, the intelligence contact, came in a month or two downstream when, allegedly, we were approached by someone in the military with stuff they wanted to present." Now, things were so off-kilter, the actual folks with real, like, genuine UFO knowledge, like the actual researchers, people like Torme and Brubaker, would begin playing pranks just to test the crew's understanding of the material. Now, things were so off kilter, the actual folks with real, like, genuine UFO knowledge, like the actual researchers, people like Torme and Brubaker, would begin playing pranks just to test the crew's understanding of the material. 'Cause, like, again, So Torme says this, quote, Curtis and I came up with a practical joke to prove a point. We came up with a bunch of silly symbols where there were supposed to be alien symbols. Some of those symbols were absolutely nonsensical stuff. Taft's article also references Shandera and Moore going out of their way to play pranks on producer Seligman. And ultimately, with all this stuff in mind, due to just the oversight of it, these pranks and fake symbols and things would kind of just become part of the show.
So it so nobody has any idea what the fuck they're doing with this other than the couple people who are actively making up stuff to fuck up.
Yeah.
Like this is such a ridiculous
And
thing.
they're doing it because the production is falling the fuck apart, and there's going to be further illuminating stuff about this. So in fact, we're about to get into it pretty hard here. So it's a bit difficult to say when exactly the production began to fall apart, but Taft's writing on the matter
before it started. Like,
I mean, yeah,
it never was together.
But like,
as far as I can tell,
when did it transform from its initial pitch into this bullshit schlock nonsense? That's sort of the question.
Okay.
Now here's Taft writing on the matter to kind of give us some insight. And again, I know it says that Taft denies writing this, but even if it wasn't Taft, whoever wrote it, a lot of the stuff that was written here was corroborated by a number of different people who worked on the show later on, like years later. So here's what it says. Quote, initially, the producer who will remain nameless, this is either Michael Seligman or some unnamed producer that we don't know who it was, but it's probably Seligman. The producer who will remain nameless throughout this piece professed to having a strong and sincere belief in ufology. For all intents and purposes, that appears to have been true, except for occasional asides, where he demonstrated a far stronger interest in butts, both that of cigars and young women. About a third of the way into production, the first dark clouds appeared, signaling something ominous on the horizon. The producer, after having several meetings during production with Condor and Falcon, both alleged clandestine government intelligence sources for the show, began showing marked symptoms of paranoia. He became quite irascible, demanding and dictatorial to all of the production staff. One particular demonstration came when he spoke with me saying, I want you to get into the possible government cover-up and conspiracy based on the data we've collected, but at the same time, I want you to remain neutral in your approach. To say that his request was a contradiction in terms would be an understatement, not to mention an impossibility for any writer. My job as the writer was to be as objective as possible, which accordingly meant that I was to demonstrate, based on the voluminous data at our disposal, that a U.S. government conspiracy had in fact occurred over the last 42 years and was still in effect. After repeated meetings with Condor and Falcon, the producer's attitude and orientation toward the show altered even further. His increasing paranoia and loss of objectivity caused him to ignore virtually every significant piece of information and event presented to him in the treatment and original screenplay. All attempts to persuade him to take seriously the Freedom of Information Act documents and data from books like Clear Intent, Sky Crash, Intruders, and Above Top Secret, along with facts on the cattle mutilation mystery, were fruitless. Under normal circumstances, a producer waits for a finished first draft of a treatment and or script before asking for a rewrite if such is desired. With the frenzied state of mind the producer was now in, he would demand to see every page as it was written, frequently lose it after it was turned in, and if not, would ask for it to be rewritten because it wouldn't meet with his approval.
Holy shit. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go.
That is an interminable. That is an unlivable workspace.
They just they're doing work
a,
and they can't, and literally none of it is being accepted.
Literally, you turn in a page at a time, and while you turn that page in, they're yelling at you that it's wrong, even though they have
literally losing it.
Yeah, Jesus Christ,
physically losing it.
This is. I don't know how this ever came to be in terms of actually putting out something that you can watch visually.
Yeah.
Because this seems like one of those things that you would hear about. There was someone pitched it, it went through some writing, there was some stuff, there was a bunch of turnover, and then it just all got canned. Nowadays, this would have never made it to air because it would have been canceled before this got to this.
It would end up on, if it somehow got completed, it would end up as like a $2 rental on Amazon Prime in the very dusty back, farthest back the database lets you go.
Yeah. Or Gaia would be hosting it
or
some shit.
Gaia, yeah. It goes on to say, because of his confused state of mind, he really had no idea exactly what he wanted. The producer's incredible indecisiveness drove the creative staff to distraction and finally to their wits' end, as the show was on a very short-term deadline. Yes, we had the cooperation of several government intelligence sources. Emmenegger is another UFO researcher and author, and he's featured on the show. Emmenegger said he would talk to his sources about furnishing never-before-seen footage of a supposed UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base. Tracking camera footage of a missile launch depicting a UFO paralleling the missile flight was also at one point made available from another associate of Emmenegger's. Unfortunately, both of these potentially incredible pieces of film footage were ultimately withheld. When the final treatment and partially completed teleplay were presented to the producer, his response was shocking. He rejected them because they were too serious. In the producer's own words, "What you've given me here is totally useless. I can't use a single page of it. I want copy, schlock, camp, not screenwriting." My response was simple and straightforward. Don't you want a serious show that will blow people out of their chairs? Aren't you concerned with the integrity and quality of the program? The producer simply stared into my face with a blank expression.
So this guy wanted to decided to hard pivot into a comedy special as opposed to trying to actually do the initial brief.
That's what Taft's article says, or whoever wrote this.
Jesus.
Again, it's a little hard to verify, but they know a lot about the production. There's other parts of the article that I didn't include. They do know a lot of stuff about the behind the scenes of this. So whoever wrote it probably was in fact involved. Maybe the truth was stretched. Who knows? Now, both Torme and Brubaker would later corroborate a lot of the things in this article. And to add to this bizarre turn of events, we also now have these mysterious military and intelligence contacts coming onto the show. Now, let's keep in mind what was happening during ufology at this time in the late 80s. We've done episodes on this stuff, but let me just briefly explain that. For many within the UFO community, the hottest conspiracy was that there had been alien bodies recovered from the Roswell incident, and this was coming from these Majestic 12 documents that supposedly proved it. And more had helped to get Majestic 12 out there. Shandera would also have an interview in the San Francisco Chronicle to promote UFO Cover-Up Live, in which he references Majestic 12 and all these other things. And it's in this article that he claims that the intelligence community were the ones who passed these documents on to him. So we have Moore and Shandera insisting on the authenticity of the documents, the United States military obviously denying any involvement, and the only person who could, verify the validity, verify these documents in any way was Moore and Shandera's shady intelligence operative. So the year before UFO Cover-Up Live happened, the UFO newsletter editor of Saucer Smear, Jim Mosley, would point out how all of this serves to, quote, conveniently make the Roswell incident about which Moore has written a book the most important event in world history.
Yeah, there is. It is interesting looking at this as like a starting point for Roswell being pushed to the forefront of ufology, because this is a total fucking circus, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But it feels like the only thing that it's actually going to end up doing is make people know the term Roswell at the end. That is, and nothing else is actually going to
I do think that is the staying power of all of the fucking craziness of the 80s of ufology in the United States. That's what happened. Roswell is central to the UFO mythology, and that's because of this shit.
Because now they're practically synonymous. Like, yeah. If you say like UFOs, people will immediately just like say Roswell. It's that fucking one-to-one.
Yep. Yeah, regardless of the authenticity of any of this, the presence of people claiming to be intelligence operatives, at the very least, did shake up the production. It certainly seems that there were people who claimed to be intelligence operatives on the production, and it did in fact shake up the production. So, and like I said, it rattled Seligman. Torme, in fact, says this, quote, Seligman was looking over his shoulder all the time. It was kind of comical. We used to play games where I would be talking to one of the producers and they would say, hold on a minute, MJ7 is on the phone. And I would say, wow, that's weird. I just talked to MJ9. We, we would say it to rib Michael Seligman because he seemed to think once he knew about this stuff, the Men in Black were going to show up at his door.
Yeah.
Brubaker.
I do like using this as a rib though. Like, feel free. This is fun.
Yeah. Brubaker also mentioned Seligman's behavior becoming more erratic and secretive after the introduction of this intelligence contact. And so he says this, quote, "He seemed to get more and more paranoid. I was the last holdout because I was the guy who brought the concept in. He circulated non-disclosure agreements to everyone in the crew. I refused to sign it. I think I was the only one. He couldn't fire me very well. But after everybody signed them, he seemed to get paranoid more and more and wouldn't tell us what he was learning from these unusual contacts. That input became the heart of the narrative of the show." Seligman would, I guess, also ask the entire cast and crew to swear oaths of secrecy. And then I mentioned before, like the other two specials before it, part of the hook of the thing would be that they were going to hire a celebrity to host the event. So for this show, they reeled in Mike Farrell, best known for his role as Captain BJ Honeycutt in the TV series MASH.
Okay.
He had been hired under the impression that the whole thing would be a live event, but would find out very suddenly on the day of the shoot that he would be reading from a script and much of the rest of the cast would be looking at cue cards. So here is actually Farrell in his own words talking about how he felt about this in 2021. He says, quote, "I was dissatisfied with the show when I learned that I was not allowed to ask questions beyond what was on the script. There were people who came on who made certain claims, and I was given a script to serve as how to ask questions and what to prompt them to say. It was very frustrating to me to not be able to follow up."
Yeah. Like I get that they were basically looking for an award show presenter, not an actual interviewer here, it seems. They just wanted someone to move the show along and not ask questions.
Yeah, there is a bizarre sense of like, just fucking get it done. We don't care, you know?
Yeah.
Now, this wasn't the only major mix-up that happened on the day of the shooting. Two anonymous guests in silhouette and electronically modified voices would spontaneously be brought in on that day, going by code names Falcon and Condor. People I mentioned before. These interviewees would divulge major secrets about government involvement in a cover-up, among other things. So Falcon would be introduced by Moore as his intelligence contact and whistleblower on Majestic 12. And Condor would suggest that the well-known government investigation into UFOs, Project Blue Book, had been compromised, mostly serving as a means to discredit the UFO phenomenon.
Okay. I mean, neither of those things are that wild a thing to push now. Like those are things that are very common in ufology at this point in time, right now. I honestly forget exactly the timeline of those things. Were those like shocking things then?
I mean, I don't know about the Project Blue Book thing, although I do think in the context of this production, it is super weird that they have this guy on there talking about that. Especially since Majestic 12, for all intents and purposes, is just a big fat load of hog shit. So it's pretty weird. But I don't know if it was like a new idea, honestly. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So the two anonymous agents would explain how Majestic 12 is the real Blue Book and that the information given to Majestic 12 came through Project Aquarius. And they have a fucking stupid ass chart showing how these things filter through these different organizations.
Yeah.
And all, just classic conspiracy connections that we've previously covered on this subject. Falcon would also explain the government's relationship with an extraterrestrial biological entity, or EBE. That's what they called him. This was a 3-foot tall gray alien. And bizarrely, among these earth-shattering claims, Falcon and Condor would make a point to mention that the alien contact worships the universe, quote, as a supreme being, enjoys the sounds of Tibetan throat singing, and likes to snack on strawberry ice cream.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like this is something that there's something that happens in terms of trying to get the general public interested in something like this. Those kinds of things, like it's why the ET in the movie is is into Reese's Pieces, and that's like synonymous with him.
Yeah.
Is like there's something, the humanizing is the wrong word, but it's because it's an alien. But like there's something humanizing about giving these specifics
Yeah.
to something that make it seem more true. Like
Yes.
if you were just like, this is an alien that has an entirely different biology and they can't do any of this stuff, whatever. I feel like that is less believable to the layman than if you
Sure.
sprinkle in a couple little details like, oh, they don't have strawberries, but they for some reason love strawberry ice cream because it's close to something in their home world, or like
But
that kind of bullshit.
at the same time, you have to think about how absurd the idea is to humanize an alien, like an
Yeah,
alien from a far off, like another galaxy. It implies some sort of like weird universal thing, but
I mean, it goes into the thing that we talk about so much, which is the exceptionalism of Earth,
yeah,
and especially
yes,
America,
yeah,
where like, of course, this alien has to love something that we make, because Earth and Americans are so special that it's just as it. Of course,
yeah,
they like those things.
yeah, absolutely. Now, you may recall that Bill Moore in the third part of my UFO disinfo series was in contact with a shady Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent named Richard Doty.
Oh God, there he is.
Apparently, Moore's secret intelligence contact, Falcon, had met with him a few weeks prior to his breakout hit book on Roswell. Then, only a few months after the release of his book, Moore would be introduced to Doty by Falcon. What follows for nearly a decade is the disinformation campaign that Moore himself had been roped up into and also would later admit to, in which he disseminated false information among UFO groups. This would include Paul Benowitz, of course, covered this on the show. And after the tremendous upset of the MUFON 1989 symposium, in which Bill Moore would admit to basically working with Rick Doty to, do all this shit to put out a bunch of bullshit info. Bill Moore would also insist that his involvement in the disinfo campaign was to try to secure legitimate information among the, to borrow a term from E.T. the Extraterrestrial, TRAFE.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what happens not long after UFO Cover-Up Live. Like, it's like a year later. Now, in the article that I got all this from, there's actually a quote from I hadn't seen this before. There's a 1983 FBI report on Moore about his, like, where these agents talk to him about his involvement with AFOSI. And here's what the FBI report says, quote, Moore declared that he has never had in his possession any classified documents from any government agency. Moore did admit, however, that individuals had made unauthorized verbal disclosures to him. However, Moore denied ever using that information or passing it along to anyone.
Huh. So he just straight up like
So it calls into question his
Yeah.
claim that there's truth among the bullshit, which is a thing that I actually still see people say about Bill Moore and the Majestic 12. It's like, yeah, but like you can kind of read between the lines and find truth in there. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, it seems absolutely made up. I know there's like a whole offshoot of Majestic 12 that like there's a secret like thing inside of Majestic 12 and shit, but like it seems to be utter nonsense every time you look into it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
To this day, the producer Seligman claims that there was never any interference by any intelligence or military operative during production of UFO Cover-Up Live. He's been reached out to. He does not comment on the matter. I think the one thing that people were able to get out of him over the years was he mentioned something about maybe one of the contacts on the show was a military scientist of some kind.
Okay.
However, as we've already seen, many of the folks who worked on the project will just readily contradict this. In fact, most of the people willing to speak about it contradict the claims that Seligman makes about it being normal. In the years since the program aired and flopped, Brubaker would come out and directly accuse Richard Doty of being Falcon.
Interesting.
Uh,
Okay, I was.
even directly saying
Ooh.
that once Doty and another intelligence contact had been introduced to Seligman, that is exactly when the show's production began its dramatic shift.
This guy is just gonna become like. This might be the first on-site guy for It Gets Weird. Is Doty alive? I honestly
Yeah,
forget.
yeah, pretty sure. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean
Well,
the he gets brought up in Mirage Men. In fact, in the book Mirage Men, which I have been reading, Mark Pilkington, I believe his name is that his name? Yeah, Mark Pilkington, uh, has a very brief thing in there about UFO Cover-Up Live, but he does talk about Falcon as the contact for Bill Moore, and he just flat out is like, nope, fucking Falcon is Rick Doty, 100%.
Jesus.
And then the now Falcon, we have Falcon, who here's the thing. Supposedly, Falcon on UFO Cover-Up Live is Richard Doty,
Mm-hmm.
but also supposedly not the original Falcon contact that Bill Moore had met that introduced him to Richard Doty. Supposedly.
So the Falcon switched to Richard Doty after being someone else, I
Who
guess.
knows? I think it's all Richard Doty, frankly. But
Okay.
uh,
He the first time he met Bill Moore, he was doing a British accent. All right, I'm Falcon.
yeah,
Eh?
he had like a top
and
hat
then,
on
you
and a
know,
mustache, and then he would take it off, and he'd be like, "Oh, and I'm yeah." That's how it went down, probably.
I'm the Falcon now.
Now, who was Condor?
Who the fuck was Condor?
Who the fuck was Condor? Condor is pointed at as being a man named Robert Collins. Now, Robert Collins was an Air Force intelligence officer and a scientist who had a background in theoretical physics. And Robert Collins and Richard Doty would come together to write a book called Exempt from Disclosure. And okay. So Collins is the primary author of this book, Exempt from Disclosure. And he basically admits that he was Condor and that Doty had acted as Falcon for UFO Cover-Up Live. He mentions this meeting that would happen on a lake with Doty and Seligman, and it would seem to reference one of the meetings that got brought up by the other people who worked on the production, who were wondering what was going on. Doty, however, would also just vehemently deny that he was ever Falcon, and he also denies having a relationship with Collins, and he denies ever having worked on UFO Cover-Up Live.
I bet you would for how much of a fucking train wreck this thing ended up being.
Now here's a thing. Here's an interesting thing. There's a book called Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, UFO Disinformation in the Age of Aquarius. It's on my list of things to try and pick up. This is written by Adam Gorightly, which is a wild name, frankly. I'd never seen the surname Gorightly.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if there's a Go Leftly.
Oh, come on. You're better.
I'm sorry. But there's a lot of contradictions, believe it or not, that Doty makes. Just tons and tons of things that seem to be catching Doty in outright lies. So,
oh, really? Richard fucking Doty's lying? Yeah. Who would have fucking thunk it?
So he cites a 2001 edition of Saucer Smear by, I mentioned earlier, Jim Moseley. And there's a statement that was made by Doty where he claimed that he was no longer in the military by the time that UFO Cover-Up Live had aired. But they also have documents that were these statements that Doty had made himself that were kept in a personnel file from the New Mexico State Police. And this was released by the website The Black Vault, which is like, I forget the name of the guy running it, but they basically are Freedom of Information Act warrior things, and they get a bunch of shit on there but specifically they look for like UFO and paranormal stuff.
Cool.
And in this 1992 memo, it references body armor that was issued to him by the New Mexico State Police Department the same month and year that UFO Cover-Up Live aired.
Okay.
Then in another issue of Saucer Smear from October 20th, 1987, there was footage that was described that had been shot by Bill Moore and Shandera that has a lot of similarities to the Falcon bit that ended up in the show. So Mosley says this, quote, "There are also several videotapes. We were allowed to see one 20-minute tape and most of another. These consist of a supposed agent talking in a totally disguised voice, answering a list of questions from a supposed newsman. The agent is disguised and the newsman has his back to the camera. The proven identities of these two are known to Moore and Shandera, they say. No one was present at the tapings except these two, plus Moore, Shandera, and the producer." And this footage was shot in a remote location in, I believe, New Mexico, way before 1987. And then there's also UFO skeptic Philip Klass, who wrote in a 1991 newsletter about a report that was issued by Bill Moore and Jamie Shandera. And this report was called the MJ-12 Documents, an Analytical Report. And this document references the footage. And here's what Klass has to say about it. Quote, "According to the Moore and Shandera report, on January 28th, 1983, Falcon, allegedly a highly placed intelligence official, agreed to fly to Los Angeles and be videotaped revealing highly classified UFO secrets." Sorry, I said New Mexico. It's Los Angeles. Providing his voice and appearance were electronically disguised on the tape. The taping was done in the presence of an unnamed CBS executive and an investigative reporter, according to Moore and Shandera. The tape was never used on CBS's 60 Minutes. Now, we can confirm that this footage was shot in 1983, and then the meeting in 1987 occurred. In the Saucer Smear issue, where Moore and Shandera report that basically they reference this producer or whoever they were, this CBS executive, and it seems that this is the same person that is mentioned in this report. That was like present for this footage. Then in UFO Cover-Up Live, one of the people that gets interviewed in the show, Peter Leone, identified himself as a, quote, executive producer of news for the CBS station in Los Angeles. And he goes on to explain that he had met and verified Falcon's identity on two separate occasions in 1983 and 1987.
Okay.
So
what?
So point is, this CBS guy essentially confirms a thing that was sort of uncertain in UFO Cover-Up Live. And so because this video shoot had happened before the production on UFO Cover-Up Live had even like been a twinkle in the eye of Brubaker, basically Doty's presence would have been unnecessary at the live broadcast.
Gotcha. Okay. I get what. Okay. I'm with you now.
So because of these statements that Doty has made from all these different sources, we can confirm that he was stationed at Kirtland Air Force Base in 1983. And that's actually one of the locations where Linda Moulton Howe claimed to have met with him in April of 1983. And his service record, which was eventually released by the National Personnel Records Center, he had separated from the Air Force in September of 1988, and that Kirtland Air Force Base was his last duty station.
Okay.
Now, we basically, all of this points to he was nearby for this video shoot as well, on top of everything that we've mentioned. Now, this also causes us to question Moore and Shandera's statements, because Moore said it's said that Moore had introduced Shandera to Falcon in 1982, this is what Shandera claimed on UFO Cover-Up Live. He straight up says in the video that they were introduced in 1982, and Shandera claims that in the interviews, like I said, He didn't get the MJ-12 documents until 1984. I read also that it was at one point stated 1985. But if they'd already gotten this footage of Falcon talking about the program, as confirmed by the aforementioned saucer smear and all that, then they would have known the details about the program a year prior to receiving the original classified documents outlining its configuration.
Interesting. Okay, so the timeline of this starts to get really funky then.
Yes.
Okay.
And so Moore, despite what he has said to the FBI, would have knowingly passed along classified information to two cases, both to Shandera and Leone, and all of that hinges on the Majestic 12 information being legitimate.
So if Majestic is real, then this guy has given out classified documents. The only thing keeping this guy out of prison is the fact that the Majestic 12 shit's fake.
Yeah. So let me summarize this. These bullshit documents that stirred the pot of ufology throughout the 1980s led to an absolutely, completely fucked up live, not live documentary whose production completely fell apart because of the presence of these shady, self-proclaimed intelligence operatives. And that's the story of UFO Cover-Up Live.
Wow.
Bill Moore, the more I read about him, the more it looks to me like maybe... So I kind of read him when we did our first disclosure thing. I read him a little more like, innocent,
Mm-hmm.
The more I learn about him, the more I feel like he was legitimately, whether or not Shandera was in on it, whether or not Doty is in on it, I feel like he was, let me put it this way, going into business for himself.
Okay.
And I think Doty too is sort of like that. It's hard to say. But this all this shit came from this is how I think I want to, let me frame it this way. We have solidified the myth on a foundation of nonsense. And I think that this UFO Cover-Up Live is just a weird, funny little extra thing to uncover that further makes me think that fucking Doty and Moore, and probably honestly Shandera, are charlatans.
Yeah, this is such, the time frame of this is so interesting because it's UFO stuff is getting more known and more popular and everything, and this comes out, and this seems like a total fucking farce from how you're describing it. So I'm like, I don't know, is it did this have like any lasting impact that you know about in terms of like, I don't know, did I don't know what impact this thing could have.
I really don't know. I almost feel like there's nothing to suggest that this is true, just like kind of a feeling that I had as I've been going through this. I kind of wonder if like this was like maybe a bit of a boiling point, because I think Bill Moore was legitimately frustrated with the production. Like, I think that Bill Moore genuinely wanted to this when he worked on this. I think there is some part of it where he did legitimately want to, create a source of information for the Majestic 12 documents. You see what I'm saying? Like, but I do think also that, like, I don't know. I think its lasting impact is like people online seem to kind of remember it sort of fondly from when they were like watching it as kids.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody in ufology thinks it's a fucking terrible disaster and frankly looks bad. I watched it. It is bad. And the one thing that like lingers in the back of my mind the more I dig into the various arcs of Bill Moore and Richard Doty and all this stuff, and honestly, even Linda Moulton Howe, is how exasperated and over it some of the people who research this stuff are.
Yeah, I can see that.
I'm not going to name names, but reading some people talk about it, they're just like, I don't even want to talk about this shit anymore because there's so much garbage. There's an unbelievable amount of garbage you have to sift through, and that seems to be by design. And the question is, to what end, of course. And you know, I think when I came away from the disinfo conspiracy episodes, I was kind of like, wow, the government is wanting to like seed disinformation and misleading stuff to, keep people away from these black site projects and other things like that. But also, I think there is an element somewhere in here of somebody just trying, like probably just Bill Moore, trying to, make money off of this event. I mean, the way it lines up with like how it was pointed out earlier in the episode about how like you made Roswell the most important, the center of attention of the UFO mythology. And you just happen to be the guy who wrote the book about that. And there's still a lot of questions that I have about what the hell went down. But I think ultimately we can chalk UFO Cover-Up Live to being a fucking sham that was just on a number of levels, just disastrous and ultimately kind of worthless, but funny.
Do you ever think about the whole thing? Like, I feel like there's an element that you could read into this, that is, entirely me pulling this out of my ass, but it's something that I think is interesting. Do you know the whole conspiracy theory about why Frozen was made, the movie?
I feel like I've heard this before. I don't remember. It's not the Disney hates moms thing, is it?
No, it's the title of the movie being Frozen is because then if you Google search Disney Frozen, you don't come up with the cryogenically frozen Disney thing.
Yeah.
You come up with the movie. Right. So like, this was pre that.
Yeah.
But like, there's something that like a program that is so laughable and like so fucked up called UFO Cover-Up Live. Sure.
Yeah.
Being put out there. I feel like it kind of muddies the waters in a way that is interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
it
all of this shit from the 80s was about, I think, muddying the waters. It's just a question of intent to me. How much of it is Richard Doty? Like, there's a whole angle of this that like we'll have to get into in another episode sometime, where Richard Doty really it does not make any fucking sense. I haven't brought this up, and I really should. I should have brought it up by now. It makes absolutely no goddamn sense that Richard Doty would have some sort of like classified information. Like, there's no way that this dude has secret clearance to information about this stuff. And I don't mean that insofar as like, of course we would keep the UFO documents secret from a person like Richard Doty. I mean more that like, I think Richard Doty is lying about his position with the AFOSI. Like, I think he's probably not as big of a deal as his story sort of suggests he is. But again, he denies everything and he's constantly lying in every single thing that he gets featured in. And he seems to, he has a smug, punchable face. And Bill Moore, like, it's like, how much of this is Richard Doty lying for whatever reasons he has versus how much of it is Bill Moore trying to, make a career out of, I mean, he already had a career, but how much is it him just trying to become the big shit UFO guy who broke the Roswell story and has, and get his buddy Shandera in it? I don't know. But I think my one big fear with all this is like, I feel like eventually I'll hit a brick wall and I'll be kind of just like sick of the bullshit, sick of the shit, and
then you just have to do some cryptid.
Then I got to do something
for a while,
else.
and
I mean,
some paranormal stuff. And you'll
I'll refresh, and I really do want to also revisit. I was just thinking about how the other thing that I would really like to look back into is the early days of contactees. That's good stuff too.
Yeah. There is something like long term frustrating about trying to about like I feel like that's partially why I tend to go into the more ridiculous stuff,
Mhm.
is because if you do too many episodes in a row about disclosure or about disinformation or all this stuff, it just, you start to feel very worn down by it.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, I'm just entertained by the characters and the stories. I find the
Mhm.
story very entertaining. But there's a lot of people out there who are diehard UFO believers, and it's a disclosure is a dangling carrot that they'll just never catch. It's on that fucking stick, and they're chasing it, and it just is. It's not going
Yeah.
to happen. It doesn't exist. Sorry, that's my opinion. Um. Anyways, I just wanted to briefly mention that my source for this was an article called "The Cover-Up Behind UFO Cover-Up Live, Parts 1 through 3" in Diabolique magazine by Robert Skvarla. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Um, but that Skvarla has been an. Let me put it this way: I've been following them for a while on social media and reading stuff that they put out in a lot of different places. And chef's kiss. Check out their articles, but definitely read, the cover up behind UFO Cover Up Live, because that was my main source. I also stumbled upon a lot of different other things in here, but that was my main source. I found a lot of different. I was on a lot of different websites this last week, Niall. A lot.
Yeah, that happens a lot. You've sent me a couple just in the last couple days that are very interesting.
Yeah.
So
Anyways, that's the story of UFO Cover Up Live. Niall, are you ready for a big question? Given that we're going pretty late this week, I have a short and I have a short and sweet one.
cool.
What kind of ice cream do you think the reptilians prefer?
Okay, so my first thought
Ooh.
that it's maybe a little too on the nose is like, I feel.
Wait.
What?
Do you want to go 3, 2, 1 and we say it at the same time?
Sure, fuck it.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Matcha.
Pralines and cream.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I don't know. I think they like a little herbaceous, a little bit herbal green tea. Like a little
Okay.
green tea ice cream.
I like that.
It's a nice palate cleanser.
I chose pralines and cream because as a child that was my least favorite ice cream.
Okay,
now
wait. I have to say this. You
Yeah.
were the one that decided to do the countdown and say at the same time thing. Was that because you thought
Yeah.
we had the same idea, or did you just think that we would make this quicker by
I guess I kind of assumed that pralines and cream was a universal disliked ice cream from when you were younger. Like that's a memory people would have.
okay.
But maybe that's just me.
Yeah,
Maybe
no,
I
I
was
don't-
just a pralines and cream hater.
I'm honestly not sure I've ever had pralines and cream ice cream in my life. I have both eaten and made pralines before. they're good.
Here's the Niall. Sometimes you go for a bit and it
No,
flops,
hey,
and that's
it led to this bit of me really questioning your bit. So that's
it led
all
to
about it.
UFO Cover Up Live. But okay,
Yeah.
matcha. See, matcha's good. I can see we're going with their maybe yeah. I think reptilians just have like what to you is the worst flavor of ice
What's
cream?
the worst flavor of ice cream?
Because it's all pretty good,
See,
right?
I'm not like a peach person. So like I've had people like I've been to places that are like, oh, the peach ice cream, it's the best thing. And I don't do it because I generally don't like peach flavored things.
Mm.
I also am not a big cherry fan, so like that I know that would hurt you, but you also know this about me. It's been something that we've discussed.
It's fine. You can give all the cherry stuff to me. That's what I'm just thinking. I'm writhing in ecstasy thinking of eating cherry flavored things.
But I like those.
So-
Those are probably my least favorites in terms of ones that I've had.
That's fair.
But I love a coffee ice cream. I do like a green tea ice cream. I like all sorts of like sweet cream and shit like that. I'm a big ice cream fan. I just don't like those two flavors.
I love ice cream. The only problem is at 30 years old, I have to take 6 lactate pills to eat it, and that's not even a guarantee. So, I don't get to indulge in ice cream that much anymore, sadly.
We got to
miss
get
it.
you on like the fucking some of the alternative ice creams.
Some dairy-free gelato. I've had it. It's not
We got
bad.
some Trader Joe's yuzu coconut ice cream stuff that was pretty fucking good.
Ooh, that sounds good. This just in, by the way, I figured we should announce it. This episode was sponsored by Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's, trading delicious ice cream since 1942. I don't
Is
know.
that
when
how long you think Trader
Joe's.
Joe's has been around?
What, 1970 something? When did Trader Joe's?
I would think like
1893.
I was gonna say like 80s at the earliest. They're pretty.
Well, who is Trader Joe? Who did he betray?
He betrayed. It was during the Cold War. He defected from the Russians to America.
Wow. Thank you, Trader Joe. We salute you in this episode of It Gets Weird. Thank you for your ice cream and other grocery products.
Yeah.
Um,
He's actually the person behind Operation Wandering Soul. So,
do you want to take care of some business?
Let's take care of some business. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/It Gets Weird Podcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird and we're probably there.
Give us a follow on twitch.tv/It Gets Weird. Guess what? Me and Colin just beat the entire game of Elden Ring. So if you want to follow for more content like that, then you got to check us out on Twitch. Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. If you want your email read out on the show, like Derek had their email read out on this one, then fucking do it already. You know? Do I have to beg? Patreon.com/itgetsweird. Look, we have a $2 tier and we have a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to a show called It Gets Weird TV, where currently we're going through X-Files Season 1, discussing the show, going through it, having a good time. At the $5 tier, you get that show plus another show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single week at the $5 tier. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to our Discord where we're hanging out, talking about all kinds of shit. Cryptids are very popular. People talk about cryptids a lot in there. And all kinds of stuff. We also have a $1 tier, which is just a tip. You don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, we like your show. Thanks for doing what you do. Here's $1. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird Podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing out.
Peace.